Good afternoon, dear followers, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to today's event hosted by Warsaw Institute, the future of Central Europe in the light of Free Seas Initiative. I'm delighted to welcome my today's guest, Reinhard Klocek, President of Pan-European Movement of Austria,
Hello?
and Robert Gönzi, Analyst of the Migration Research Institute.
Good evening. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you for joining us today. My name is Bence Frisch, and I'm honored to moderate today's debate. Before we would even start, I would like to say that the Free Seas Partnership Program is financed by the National Institute of Freedom, Center for the Development of Civil Society. As my first question, Robert, Ukraine and Moldova have become associate partners of the Free Seas Initiative. What advantages does it bring to the region and to those two particular countries? What can we expect in the future?
Here I'd like to mention that the expansion of the Three Seas initiative towards non-EU member states is essentially inevitable for the role of the alliance because and it's one of my favorite quotes is from Deshevili, who is the director of New Direction, which is the foundation of the European Conservatives and Reformists, who mentioned that if the Three Seas initiative is limited within the borders of the EU, it is destined to fail. And I quite agree with that because everywhere we look, we have different little regional corporations connected to economy, military, trade, and all those different types of corporations that makes Central and Eastern Europe this and region of Europe. And for that, these Three Seas initiative should keep an open eye. And one of these directions could be Ukraine and Moldova. We should also mention that there are several different organizations that the 3SI should keep an eye on, such as BSEC towards Turkey or CEFTA towards the Western Balkan states. But we should also mention Guam, which includes most of the Caucasus, and also Ukraine and Moldova. And regarding Ukraine and Moldova, there are of course advantages and disadvantages. One of the greatest advantages is that if these two countries are becoming member, or right now they are an associated member, but if they are becoming a full member of this initiative, the pavement towards the European Union membership will be much clearer for them, which is eventually the goal of the European Union member states. And this, of course, comes with the drawbacks as well, such as if the 3SI is the first integration cooperation for these two states, most of the recovery costs for Ukraine are going to fall on the Three Seas Initiative states because the Three Seas Initiative can become a fast lane for Ukraine for the European integration, but at the same time, most of the cost is going to fall on 3SI states. And of course, the situation in Moldova can be also questionable. From one hand, it also comes with great economic restraints, and the other hand is that from Romanian perspective, the integration of Moldova to any cooperation where Romania and Moldova is there at the same time is always comes with the price of the re-evaluation of the integration of the two states, at least the idea of it. So that can also come into picture, which can once again try to reshape the borders of Europe. But of course, these are only thoughts about this, and we are going to see what happens. But overall, the benefits are over-limiting the drawbacks.
So if we would like to summarize then that the Free Seas Initiative needs and should think out of Europe, and if Moldova and Ukraine would join to the initiative as a full-time member, it wouldn't be so easy in the first part, and it would have some complication, but more benefit than an actual complication. Reinhard, I would like to ask you the same question: whether Ukraine and what would happen if Ukraine and Moldova have become associated? Yes,
Yes,
and what other? Sorry, yes.
I just wanted to start before you finish the question. Yeah, I just can add some thoughts to what Robert already said. But the Three Seas initiative is within the European Union and also a little bit outside the European Union, one of the greatest, biggest initiatives, formats in which talks take place and cooperation takes place. And therefore, I think it's a big advantage for both countries, Ukraine and Moldova, to be at least associate partners, which means not full members, but associate partners in this initiative, because it brings a lot of advantage in having connections to the European Union, into the European Union, having the possibilities to have links on a basis which is not the EU talks in Brussels, but on a regional cooperation, and this can, in my opinion, be very good for them and positive for them on their way to the European Union integration process. We must not forget to add that too, that both countries are under threat by Russia. In Ukraine, we all know that the Russian troops are there and terrorize the country. We also know that we have Russian troops in Moldova, in a region called Transnistria. So both of them are under threat by the Russian Federation. And therefore, this enlargement of the Three Seas initiative brings also a new impact to this initiative, which means a much more geopolitical approach, as it started with just infrastructure projects.
Thank you, Reinhard. So as you can see that it will be certainly a new chapter for the Free Seas Initiative Life if they will become just a full member. Before I would ask or next question, I highly encourage our viewers to ask questions in the chat. Regarding our second questions, Reinhard, looking back at the Free Seas Initiative annual conferences in 2023 and 2024, we can see that the initiative is also very interested in enlargement. Is this kind of wave of enlargement sustainable alongside the current economic cooperation, or does the initiative need to take a completely new direction?
I would say the initiative already took a new way, because it started with the idea of having cooperation in infrastructure projects. There was no geopolitical dimension or something like that. It was limited to members of the European Union, with the fact that new member strategic partners came into this initiative, and it's not only Ukraine and Moldova, but also, for example, Japan, which is not in Europe, but is confronted with similar challenges as Europe is confronted at the moment. This is already a new direction which is on the way in the Three Seas initiative, and as far as I can see it, and also from the results and the resume from the conference, from the last conference in Vilnius, I would say this is sustainable. It is sustainable because we see that all the countries in the Three Seas initiative supported that enlargement, which is very important. It was not a discussion where somebody blocked, or as we have it in the European Union on many cases talking about enlargement, think about Macedonia, think about Albania, or think about the visa regulation of visa liberalization for Kosovo. You always had blockades. In this initiative, there was no blockade, which is very unique in European politics.
So yes, so this kind of new directive is also part of the enlargement and the new chapter of its life. Robert, I would like to ask you the same about this kind of new direction and in connection with the enlargement.
here is where I'm becoming a bit more controversial, and I also contradict myself a little because I recently did a little research, and I have came up with an idea basically that originates from that. Inside the Three Seas Initiative, there are several different sub-level regional corporations, such as the Visegrad Four, the Craiova Four, the Baltic Assembly, and what we see is that all of these different smaller corporations are relying on the pragmatism of the leaders. And until we cannot produce pragmatism at the sub-level of Central European corporations, we cannot expect from Three Seas Initiative to do the same. Therefore, first we need to stabilize and pragmatize the smaller corporations. What do I mean by that? As we see, the Three Seas Initiative is spanning on a huge territory, and there is very little common besides European Union and Three Seas Initiative membership, for example, between Estonia or Greece, Estonia and Greece. And I did a little case study regarding V4, and I realized that basically the shaking hand policies is what forming this bond between the states and destines whether this sub-level cooperation is successful or not, because we see that during those periods when the leaders of these states were aligned policy-wise and they found some common ground, the cooperation worked perfectly fine. Meanwhile, during those periods where we saw some discontent between the heads of governments, the V4 did not move in any direction. For example, during the period when the heads of the governments were Morawiecki from Poland, Fico from Slovakia, Orban from Hungary, and Babiš from the Czech Republic, everything was perfectly fine. V4 could move because between these four we see some connection. That's what I call a 4-nil situation. For example, in a 3-1 situation, such as in the case when the leader of Poland was Kopacz, the Hungarian leader was once again Viktor Orban, and the Czech leader was Sobotka, the situation was 3-1 because during that period Robert Fico and Viktor Orban did not find some common ground due to the policies of Bratislava regarding the Hungarian minority in southern Slovakia. Meanwhile, there is also a situation that is the 2-2, which is the worst, when the V4 cannot move anywhere, such as in the case when the leader of Poland was Morawiecki and the leader of Hungary was once again Viktor Orban, but at the same time the Slovakian leader was Ludovic Odor and the Czech leader was Petr Fiala. Between Odor and Fiala the relationship was perfect, between Morawiecki and Orban the relationship was perfect, but between these two groups there was little to none communication regarding V4. Therefore, once again, the V4 could not move anywhere. Therefore, what we see is that a 0-nil situation is good for progress. A 2-2 situation is not good for basically anything, and a 3-1 situation is when we can see some basic movements, but they are just keeping the V4 on ground. And of course, this just proves the point once again that we cannot rely on policy leaders, political opinions and their connection. We should pragmatize these sub-coordinations, and we should pragmatize the Three Seas Initiative as well. Otherwise, I cannot see any way how even an enlargement, which only brings in more problem. I shouldn't mention the connection between the Hungarian and Ukrainian government, for example, which also bring in some problems, that how could an enlargement make the Three Seas Initiative work more efficiently. However, at the same time, and that's why I don't want to contradict myself, enlargement can make the Three Seas Initiative stronger, but first we need to successfully pass the first phase, which is to pragmatize the sub-coordinations under the Three Seas Initiative.
May I add something?
Yes, of course.
Because it was very interesting what Robert said, to compare a little bit Visegrad 4 and Three Seas Initiative. I think the problem, or let me say it the other way around. Sometimes it's good having more people on the table, because they can stabilize the situation. Robert, you mentioned the situation Hungary-Poland against, or now Hungary-Slovakia against Poland and Czech Republic in Visegrad 4. There is nobody else who could somehow moderate these debates. And the second point I wanted to add, Visegrad 4 was used, and I would say misused, by some political leaders to establish some kind of anti-Brussels position. This never happened, thanks God, in the Free Seas Initiative, because they all know, and this is the advantage of having more people on the table, they all know that they're part of the European Union or want to become part of the European Union, well, not Japan, but Ukraine and Moldova. And therefore, I think Three Seas Initiative has a little bit advantage to some smaller formats. You mentioned several of them, and that's good in this situation.
Gentlemen, thank you for... yes, of course.
I completely agree right now with everything what you said, absolutely. And I do see the point of having a moderator, which can be any of these states who have way smaller connection to the tinier bits of the region. And that's the reason why the Three Seas Initiative's idea is so great. At the same time, I keep holding on to the fact that until the sub-coordination of these institutions are not working based on common goal, but rather on political ads, this is a problem that we should fix because it weakens the Three Seas Initiative. That's basically my only thought about it. With everything as you said, I totally agree.
Gentlemen, thank you for your interesting insight and controversial opinions. I think it's yes, and maybe Reinhard, as my next question, do you think Austria has a positive view on the enlargement, or would rather prefer to prioritize the projects that are underway?
That's a very hard question. Because Austria, as you know, is not very active in this Three Seas Initiative. Austria is member of this Three Seas Initiative because several countries are our neighbors. In several countries, Austrian companies are investors in these countries. There are several historical ties to many of these countries, from the Balkans to Central Europe, even to the east into Ukraine. So Austria is there because it is a member of the European Union, because it is interested in the development of this region, but does not play an active role as far as I see it. So my conclusion from what I just said is Austria will not be, will not be in the front line when it's about the enlargement, although there is interest to have closer cooperation on several levels with, for example, the so-called Western Balkan countries, but Austria will not block it. Austria will also in the future agree with enlargements in the Three Seas Initiative.
Thank you very much. So Austria has its unique position, but they would rather just follow where the initiative goes rather than indicate new ways. The way I see. And Robert, I would like to ask you the same, but in the view of Hungary, how does Hungary view the Free Seas Initiative, and what do you think about the enlargement, or would rather Hungary prioritize the projects that are underway?
All right. So regarding enlargement, we can say that Hungary is the complete opposite of Austria regarding enlargement of any alliances or cooperation, such as we can see in the European Union, and the same is happening at the Three Seas Initiative. And the reason for that is that Hungary is a border state of the European Union, and meanwhile it gives good opportunity to work together with non-EU member states more closely. At the same time, it have a lot of drawbacks. that protection of the outside borders. I'm from the Migration Research Institute, so at least once I should mention migration. It comes with a lot of costs that the Hungarian state should find solution to, and that's the reason why Budapest is constantly on the side of enlargement in any topics that's coming up with corporations regarding European integration. And the Western Balkans are always in the focus of that. And the main reason for that is that is the largest non-EU member region bordering Hungary. And that's why we see different movements regarding the region, such as it's not a surprise that the Chinese president decided to visit the Hungarian capital. One of the reasons is that from different perspectives and different ideas, but both China and Hungary is trying to help the Western Balkan states to gain their own foothold and becoming a thriving economy. Of course, China has a completely different route or vision regarding that. By the time Hungary and China are meeting halfway, that the support of the Western Balkan states is one of the most priority importance. And for the Hungarian states, is definitely to help they becoming an EU member states. And we can see progress from these states as well, that they want to become EU member states, such as it's not a surprise that Albania was the state which decided to agree with Italy on the externalization of asylum procedures. It could be any state, but Albania decided to have that priority, because through that they can provide the facts for the European Union that they are a trustworthy partner who can be EU member states far sooner than they want to. And one of the ideas that could help this become a reality is to become members of other integrational institutions, such as the Three Seas Initiative. And that's the reason why to integrate the Western Balkans into the Three Seas Initiative is just as important as integrating Ukraine and Moldova. Of course, from a Hungarian point of view, the situation of Ukraine and Moldova is completely different because of foreign policy tensions between the states. We are all aware of the tensions between the Ukrainian and the Hungarian state. Meanwhile, we recently have started to see some moderation processes. Phone call, which was which became a post on Prime Minister Viktor Orban's Instagram page, where he showed that he's in a phone connection with President Zelensky. But at the same time, the situation of Moldova is always tricky from a Hungarian point of view because of the massive Hungarian minority in Romania and their rights. And there is a fear always from Hungary that in case an integration could happen between the Romanian and the Moldovan state, it could become negative point for the Hungarian minority living in Romania, and it can damage their rights. But these are just the surface of this situation, because at the same time Hungary is constantly talking about the integration of these two states as well into the European communities, and I do consider the Three Seas Initiative one of the institutions of this European community.
So to summarize, is that Hungary is mostly on the side of the enlargement, but of course it's in a really complex way because of their foreign policy and this other way. If we're talking about the foreign policy, as we know that the European Parliament elections and the US elections are coming soon. Will the elections have any impact on the Three Seas Initiative and thus on the Central Europe? Reinhard, I would like to ask you first.
The elections for the European Parliament, I would say, will not have a direct impact on the development of the Three Seas Initiative. Yes, it could be if, let's say, the so-called right-wing or left-wing anti-European parties have a majority, but I don't see that. Yeah? This is the European Parliament, which is important in the European Union, but the Three Seas Initiative is a cooperation of states. It's not a cooperation of parliaments at the moment. I don't know what is going to happen in the future. So I don't think that the result of the European elections will have a big impact or effect on the Three Seas initiative. It's a little bit different when we look to the US elections. We don't know what Donald Trump would do if he becomes president. I mean, we had him as president in the United States. The Three Seas initiative survived. The Three Seas initiative could undertake some or coordinate some projects in infrastructure, etc., but the interest in the United States was going down. I don't say that the Biden administration is much more involved in that now. Yes, it is now because of Ukraine and the Three Seas initiative, with countries like Romania, who are very active in the Three Seas initiative, are directly bordering Ukraine and are with that directly on the borders to the war in Ukraine. So it's not easy to predict what's going to happen, because we will have many other influences from what happens in the rest of the world, what the United States will have to do in the future, whoever is the president.
Thank you very much. So as we can say that as important as the European Parliament elections, it doesn't have an indirect minimal effect for the Free Seas initiative, but the United States United States elections could have some results, but it is uncertain. It is uncertain now. Robert, I would like to ask you about the same. What do you think about the effect of the European Parliament or the US election results in connection with the Free Seas initiative?
I completely agree with Reinhard. The EP elections are not going to have a direct effect anyhow on the Three Seas initiative. Meanwhile, the US election is going to be a very important part, because meanwhile Donald Trump promised even financial contribution to the Three Seas initiative. And let's not forget that the Three Seas initiative is also a planned military cooperation between these states, and Trump was the one who was deeply invested in supporting Poland. It can be a great decision of the American voters for the Three Seas initiative. Meanwhile, during the administration of Joe Biden, it seems like that the elite in Washington, D.C. has completely forgot about cooperation and the possibilities of that. And let's not just talk about the situation in Ukraine, but let's also talk about LNG and how American LNG could reach the region through this north-south gas corridor and could develop a market there. Meanwhile, at the same time, I would like to also mention about the AP elections that even though it's not going to have effect, it can show an interesting photograph of the current situation and more the supporting of the parties nationwide, because what we usually hear regarding the Three Seas initiative, that it's a joint idea of President Andrzej Duda and Klaus Iohannis from Romania, and it was a joint idea of Kolinda Grabar-Kitarović in Croatia and Andrzej Duda, but since Ms. Grabar-Kitarović is not anymore in the picture, it's usually becoming a joint project between President Duda and Iohannis, and they are both strong in their position in their parties, which is the PNL in Romania for Iohannis and the PIS for Duda in Poland. And it can be an interesting moment in the EP elections that we can see how popular are those parties who are very strongly supporting the idea of the Three Seas initiative, such as PIS or PNL. And I did also a little research, and I know it might be just a coincidence, but usually those parties who are invested in the idea of the Three Seas initiative are usually in the ECR or in the ALDE party families. And what we see now is that ECR and ALDE, through the Renew party family, Renew Europe, which they are part of, both can expect 10%. which is not a bad result that might happen, but of course it could be better for them. So we might see how it turns out. There are some rumors about the possible merger of the groups ECR and ID after the elections, and the Renew Europe is usually one of the parties that might become part of the greatest corporate party families. So we might see what the future brings. But it does have some interesting points regarding Three Seas Initiative as well. Meanwhile, not a direct connection to it.
Thank you very much, Robert. So we can all agree on that the European Parliament election will not have a direct result for connection with the Free Seas Initiative, but the U.S. election is rather, especially if Donald Trump wins. As our last regarding our last.
May I add one point?
Yes, of
Because we
course.
were talking about the elections for the European Parliament and the US elections, we will also have elections in several EU countries or member states in the Three Seas Initiative. One of them is Austria in September, but Robert, you mentioned Romania and Ioannis. We will have elections in Romania, elections for the Parliament, I think local elections, but also presidential elections. I have no idea who will be the next president and what kind of majority we will have in Romania after these elections. I do not expect that the positions will be completely different. But I think when we talk about the future of Free Seas Initiative, we also have to have in our focus the fact that we will have national elections which could have some kind of influence.
Thank you very much for interesting insight. Yes, and regarding our last question, last of all, I would like to, Reinhard, I would like to ask on which policy do you expect the initiative to focus in its future actions, if there will be any?
As far as we can see, the idea of infrastructure projects is still very important in this Three Seas Initiative. Not only when it's about roads and the railways, but also when we talk about the energy infrastructure. And because of the situation we have with the Russian aggression against Ukraine, this will be more important in the future. This is also one of the results what we can see from the summit in Vilnius. And the second point, and this is very interesting, and I think this is very important from my side, is the fact that the Three Seas Initiative is going more and more into a geopolitical dimension. Why do I think it is so important? First of all, because of the challenges we are facing, but also because this could trigger at least some debates on the European Union level to develop a real European foreign and security policy.
Thank you very much. Robert, what do you think? What do you think of it?
I absolutely agree with Reinhard. Initiative. I think the original plan of the Three Seas Initiative, and it became the reality of it as well, that it's about resilience of the region, that it's a region between great powers with small states, but with a population and possibilities that if we work together, we can create resilience. And of course, the major threat is not coming from our friends from Western Europe currently, but it's coming from the Russian Federation, and we have to keep an eye on the situation, and we have to do everything that is possible to create those possibilities for us through technology transfer, through building these gas corridors, highways, railroads. It's a very great idea that right now Klaipeda, Krk, and Thessaloniki are connected with roads, but we also connect these through railroad, and of course we also have to help the Romanian state restart the finding of gas in the Black Sea. These are all possibilities for the region's resilience, and let's not forget about also the joint military efforts that would be much needed, that would create a wall from Tallinn all the way down to Athens, that could help out the region's security on all levels. And finally, the integration can be a part of this solution as well. And that's why I'm talking about this, at least for my personal opinion, contradictory topic, that regarding the integration, we should also focus on expanding, and not just only in EU member states, but also through the Western Balkans, Eastern Europe, and the Caucasus as well, because we share similar resilience problems, and we could help out each other in this hybrid war that the Russian Federation is currently conducting on several fronts against EU and member states, and as well non-EU and non-NATO member states. Let's not forget about the instrumentalization of migration that they are currently conducting, not just at the Polish-Belarusian border, but also at the Russian-Finnish border. So we cannot expect these challenges to go away just in themselves, and we should prepare ourselves for similar attacks, such as our colleagues in Estonia always trying to remind us at the Migration Research Institute that they are constantly expecting similar problems at their border crossing at Narva with Russia, as Finland is currently having at their border crossings with Russia, and Estonia is a part of the Three Seas Initiative, so we should focus on these challenges as well.
Thank you very much. So we can summarize that the Free Seas Initiative shouldn't forget its original purpose, and I think we should remain its original purpose, of course. Gentlemen, many thanks for joining me today, and thank you for sharing your expertise and experience towards the Free Seas Initiative. I wish you a pleasant night and have a nice week. And I encourage everyone to, of course, follow our upcoming events and publications. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the invitation. It was great to be here.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure to work with Warsaw Institute.